Will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. We've now moved from Genesis into Exodus in our summer series on the saga of the ancestors. And this makes me very happy because it brings us to one of my favorite stories in the entire Bible, the tale of Shiphrah and Puah. Y'all have heard this story twice already this morning, but listen to it with our modern 21st century ears, if you will. The Hebrew people have gone to live in Egypt with their ancestor Joseph, whose dreams saved the Egyptians from being wiped out in a famine. But the new Pharaoh comes to power, who feels threatened by this large immigrant population. So he enslaves the Hebrews and he afflicts them with back-breaking labor. But no matter what Pharaoh does, the Hebrews continue to multiply. So, as fearful tyrants do, he moves from slavery to murder. And Pharaoh seeks to recruit the midwives to his cause, two women named Shiphrah and Puah. He tells them to kill every Hebrew baby boy, and they smile and nod, and then go back to work and promptly ignore him. It takes Pharaoh a little while to catch on, but at some point he realizes that the boys are not being killed, and so he calls Shiphrah and Puah back and interrogates them. How is it, he says, that the boys live? And in a delightful little scene, Shiphrah and Puah not only lie to Pharaoh's face, but they use his racism and misogyny against him. They tell Pharaoh, well, you know, those Hebrew women, they're not delicate and ladylike like Egyptian women. They're animals when they give birth. They just pop them out in the field before you can say, call the midwife. And bless his heart, Pharaoh believes them. He's out of his comfort zone talking about female issues after all, so he abandons that plan and instead commands all of Egypt, when you see a baby Hebrew boy, throw him in the Nile. So then a Hebrew woman comes along. We find out later her name is Jochebed, and she gives birth to a baby boy. And when she cannot hide him any longer, she does just what Pharaoh says. She throws him in the Nile. She just happens to put him in a basket first. And she sends his sister Miriam to stand by and watch over him. You know the story. Pharaoh's own daughter is the one who finds the baby. And she says, oh, this is a Hebrew baby. One of the ones my father commanded us to kill. I think I'll take him in instead and raise him as my own son. And in a last delicious twist, she hires Moses' own mother to nurse the child. So it is that Shiphrah and Puah set off a chain of civil disobedience and resistance to cruel and unjust policies. And the baby Moses, the one who will grow up to deliver the Hebrew people, is saved. Most scholars think that Shiphrah and Puah are Hebrews. Their names are Hebrew names. They serve Hebrew women. And in the English translation that Carol just read for us this morning, they're referred to as the Hebrew midwives. But the text itself is ambiguous. The phrase used to identify these women could mean the Hebrew midwives, or it could mean the midwives to the Hebrews. And there is something of a minority report among scholars arguing that Shiphrah and Puah are actually Egyptians. These scholars point out that Shiphrah and Puah have not one but two audiences with the king of Egypt, which seems unusual for slave women. And in their response to Pharaoh, the midwives seem to have experience with the birthing practices both of Hebrew and Egyptian women. Perhaps the most convincing argument, to me at least, is the fact that Pharaoh tries to conscript these midwives into his conspiracy to kill all the Hebrew boys at birth, which doesn't make a ton of sense if these women are Hebrews themselves. We'll never know for certain the ethnicity of the two women, and the majority of scholars are probably right. They're scholars, after all. But it's a fun thought experiment. Does the story change if Shiphrah and Puah are not Hebrews, but Egyptians? If Shiphrah and Puah are Egyptians, then their choice to save the Hebrew boys is no longer the clever act of an enslaved people fighting for their own survival, is it? Instead, it becomes a conscious choice made by these two daughters of the empire, women with Egyptian citizenship and privilege, to disobey the law of the land and act with compassion toward the foreigners in their midst. An Egyptian, Shiphrah and Puah, risked their privilege and their careers in order to stand in solidarity with the vulnerable. They put their lives on the line in order to do the right thing. I enjoy entertaining the idea of an Egyptian, Shiphrah and Puah, because it helps me find my place in the story. For in our present context of xenophobia and anti-immigrant sentiment, the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? I am not among the most vulnerable, the most threatened. And often, I don't know exactly what to do in this situation. An Egyptian, Shiphrah and Puah, show me an answer. It doesn't take my son being thrown in the river for me to know that throwing babies in the river is wrong. And so, like Shiphrah and Puah, we can resist. We can refuse to fall in line with policies and orders that deal death and destruction. Like Shiphrah and Puah, we can find that courage to simply say no. Pharaoh, after all, is a familiar figure in the course of human history. We have seen no shortage of murderous despots, have we not, breathing threats against specific group of people, and surely we will see more. But whenever Pharaoh rears his ugly head, whenever he cries out, "Throw those babies in the river," Shiphrah and Puah are always right there alongside him, saying no. No, Pharaoh. We know right from wrong. And we're not going to do that thing you say to do. Thanks, though. Even if Shiphrah and Puah are not Egyptians, Pharaoh's daughter surely is. And yet she is the one who decides to save the baby Moses and raise him as her own son. What's more, Pharaoh's daughter conspires with Moses' mother and sister. They come up with a little scheme where Moses' mother is invited into Pharaoh's own house and paid with Pharaoh's own money to nurse her baby. After all, do we really think Pharaoh's daughter doesn't suspect that this woman bursting with milk who just happens to be waiting nearby is the child's mother? All 5 of the women in this story make a choice. Will we be complicit in death and destruction? Or will we say no? Will we practice resistance? Will we trust what we know to be right and wrong, and in doing so be midwives of God's grace and mercy? And then, having made that choice, these 5 women go and do what is right in front of them. Notice that none of these women, heroes though they are, go running around looking for their part to play in the story. They serve God and resist Pharaoh simply by going about their daily lives. Shiphrah and Puah deliver babies. They're midwives, that's what they do. They serve God and practice civil disobedience by doing their day jobs. Moses' mother gets married, and then she has a baby. And then she does what every mother does. She looks for ways to protect her child. Moses' sister does what every older sister has been asked to do time and time again. She babysits her little brother. And Pharaoh's daughter, she just takes a bath. She goes down to the river as she always does, and it is there that she stumbles her way into being a critical player in God's deliverance of the Hebrew children. Friends, we do not have to do it all. We do not have to solve the recurring age-old trouble, the problem of pharaohs arising throughout history. That's not what's required in order to make a difference. We can do what is right in front of us. And we can trust that our simple acts of resistance, of mercy, of compassion, of love, that they change things. Our day-to-day resistance matters. From generation to generation, Pharaoh issues his call. Throw those baby boys in the river. And we, the Midwives of Mercy, say, no thanks. The God we worship has other plans